Hello, U.S. History 101 class. Welcome to the first week of U.S. History 101. And I'm really excited to be teaching this. I think it's been over a year since I've had a 101 class. But I will admit that every time I get this class, I really try to extra prepare myself to keep in mind that unfortunately, and I think that we are all aware of this, Americans are getting more and more contentious with each other in our politics. We are living during very divisive times. Now, we're going to eventually cover the Civil War, so we haven't got to that point yet. And unfortunately, whether it's exaggerated or not, we're literally at a point where there's discussions about if America could ever get to that point again. I mean, that's how big the differences are coming into 21st century America. And I'm mindful of that because every time I teach this, as we get into the discussions, this is where I would like all of you to pause for a moment. Now, I'm not here to convert any of you on your politics. I am here to teach you history and to teach you quality history. I am going to do my best to get you engaged, to be critical, and to analyze what we know, and we're going to delve into some primary texts because sometimes we hear things about American history and we're not sure how biased it is, but we can look at documents and see what certain founders had to say about certain subjects and all of that. Okay, so we're going to do that, but I want you all here to approach each other with basic manners. Okay, straight up. As I mentioned in some of my announcements and I think I might have put it in my syllabus, you have a constitutional right to free speech, which I support. But in the class, that doesn't mean that you get to say anything you want in a classroom. We still have classroom decorum. It's just like if you go to a business or if you're going to church or another house of worship or not worship, there's just in different environments that you can you can talk in a certain way or not. Now, what I'd like you all to do is don't act like you don't know what that is, okay? Most of you here are old enough to understand what it means to have manners, even when you really disagree with an opinion. I will not be looking, I'm not really worried too much about trying to deal with correcting this. For the most part, most of my students have handled this well. Every once in a while, I get a student that's over the top and says something very insulting that's just too much. And I want you to know, I could agree with your opinion. It doesn't matter. You don't talk to another student in a bad way, okay? So let's just get that clear. Now, in terms of the papers, I'm just letting you know, you are allowed to express any of your political thoughts within reason of professionalness. And here's what I mean. If you wrote, obviously, something encouraging violence or really over the top, that's not going to work. But I'm not going to judge your paper based on whether I agree with your interpretation of history. Write me a good, respectful college paper, as conservative or leftist as you want, and I'm fine with that. Okay, just keep in mind that this is college, so I'm trying to give you a good education, and I'm also trying to prepare you to move on to a university setting and to learn the skills that college is supposed to give you on how to be, to be a good professional as well, to make your degree more than just learning, but also learning how to do several different things, if that makes any sense. Okay, so I am giving you an example of paper, of what Sunday paper should look like. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in just a second, but I just want to go over the books we're talking about and the subject matter just a little bit more. So I have several textbooks for this class. and I know that this might seem excessive. Keep in mind, if you go to a university in a history class, I often had 7 books a class when I went to UC Santa Cruz for my bachelor's degree. But in any case, it's not as daunting as it looks. So this is the textbook that I highly recommend, but I did not require. Now your picture might look different than this. I have a teacher's copy that's volume 1 and volume 2 together. Excuse me. And so if it's not looking like this exactly, that's okay. I have the Keene, Cornell, and O'Donnell text. I actually made my videos originally with a Brinkley text. Most of the US textbooks say a lot of similar stuff. They're very middle of the road. They don't really come off as very politically, like having a strong agenda one way or the other. They're just going to give you a broad view of history, and that's why I highly recommend it, so that you can listen to my lectures, you can watch the videos, and then think about the other book that I'm about ready to introduce and talk about, and see how these things all go together or not, in your opinion. Okay, so again, highly recommend getting the textbook. You are not required. You can start moving forward with your assignments without it. Some students never get it. It's going to be up to you and for you to decide what you want to get out of your education. Okay, so the book we do have to start with is this. There's different pictures for this book as well. This is Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. And like I said, probably the copy you're going to have is going to have a little different one. I think it'll be red, white, and blue. This is a great book. I have used this a lot. It's very popular. I'm certainly not the only one to use it. But it's also a bit controversial. It is a hot topic depending on your political persuasion. And so I am going to just kind of out this book for what it is. I'm going to explain to you why I'm still using it, and then you'll get a chance to engage with it. So keep in mind, you don't have to agree with one thing said in this book, or you can be at odds with it, and that's totally legitimate. But this book is one of the best books for generating discussions in discussion groups, okay? Which is why this will be used for much of your discussions, not all of them, but quite heavily. Now, he is a leftist. He is a military war vet of World War II on the United States side, and a very solid U.S. war vet. But he became very disillusioned with war and very skeptical of, let's say, elites. Okay? And so he writes this in a very critical viewpoint of, let's say, the founding fathers and Columbus and so forth. And he wrote this book. This is actually very dated. The language is also going to be, you're going to notice certain words used and phrases that are not really used now. But having said that, while he's been critical, for all of the various opinions that I've heard about this book, one that I've never seen stated is that it actually is using false information, distorting history to a point that it actually gets discredited. In other words, the issue that some people have had is that they feel like it doesn't make, it's not conservative. It critiques important topics to one branch of politics in a way that some people don't like. What I want you to know, again, you don't have to agree with any of this. Even many of my students that have been conservative, and some of my friends that are conservative professors also that have looked at this book, actually enjoyed it because the information is not skewed. He's taking a certain stance or a look or a glance at certain events and giving a certain interpretation to them, which you are encouraged to engage with, and you can disagree, okay? So I just think that you're going to find this very stimulating, engaging for yourself, regardless of whether or not your politics line up with his. Now, there's a book I'll show you. I bought it a while back. This book was trying to be the answer to the people's history, a patriot's history of the United States. And I looked at this and I was just curious if it was if it would operate in the same way. And I have a friend that's also very conservative, and we both looked over this and he said, you know, it's not really the equivalent, because it's a good history book, but it doesn't generate the discussions and create the ways in which to operate in discussions that the other book does. So it's a decent history book. You know, I don't think it's much different than this one, to be honest. It's just maybe he sold a lot more of these books to people who are wanting to go against the others, you know, Zen. So in any case, feel free, like I said, to critique Zen all you want. Now, at the end of this class, we're going to be using Defending Slavery. I have the older edition. I'm going to buy the newer one. I gave you the link for the newer one. If you can get either one, any copy. We just might have to adjust the page numbers for our discussion. So we'll put away Zen at a certain point, and we'll engage with this. Now, this is what we're going to tackle as we get into the U.S. Civil War, because this is strictly using primary texts. We will see what Thomas Jefferson has to say about slavery and about people from Africa, his opinions, and the context of all of that in his mind regarding America then and what he saw in the future. We will see Baptist ministers defending slavery and writing why the Bible in their minds supports having institutions that were set up in the United States. And we will look at this from very prominent journals, prominent people. So this is not just obscure. These are important characters. We will see a speech from the cornerstone speech from the Vice President of the Confederacy and his defense of slavery and why he was articulating that slavery wasn't the part of the Civil War. And so that gets down to the other part of this, is that I want you to see primary text. There's still a debate about what the Civil War was about. But all of the southern states and their declarations of secession stated why they were seceding from the Union. And can you guess what reason they said they were actually breaking away from? But I'll let you read the text themselves instead of making you feel like I'm indoctrinating you with something, okay? Now, here's the other side of this that I want us to realize. In this class, we're not going to get to resolving any of the current political debates that are taking place about this history. In other words, we might have a lot of different opinions after this class, after reading all the information on what it looks like to move forward or to make America like the place that everybody's happy with regarding the history that we're studying. I'm not really planning on doing a whole lot of trying to articulate like where, you know, a conservative or a leftist point of view would try to steer us now looking at this information. What I think is important, though, is that because so many Americans don't even agree about the sources that they're reading anymore or looking to on the news. I mean, we don't even agree on why the U.S. Civil War actually happened. If we're not having an understanding about the Founding Fathers' actual positions on things and why Americans killed each other not that long ago, and all of that, then we're going to have a much more difficult time now trying to resolve American life now. So my hope is if we can just get grounded in good, solid history and we can all agree about the documents and what actually happened, then maybe outside of this classroom, as we engage with modern life in America, we can at least come as a more informed person, regardless of whatever your political stripes are, okay? And so that's something I just wanted to make clear. So I hope that you're seeing the kind of approach that I'm taking to this class. And I also, you're going to notice I'm putting a link for, for you to look at history at times of things going on outside the United States when we're talking about the U.S. One of the biggest problems with U.S. history is that because we're so big, Americans, United States, those of us living in the United States often are living in a bubble. And so you'll hear people say we're the greatest country on the earth or we're the worst country on earth. But if you ask most of the people who are saying we're the best or the worst, they haven't really traveled outside of the United States. And if you went to a war, by the way, I'm not a pacifist, so I don't know if you know what my agenda is. But what I'm saying is, if you've traveled and you've only been in warfare, that's still not traveling, seeing. I mean, you're going into a crisis situation, regardless of what we interpret the war to mean. So what I'm saying is, a lot of you haven't had a chance to go see other parts of the United States, and sometimes we look at U.S. history like, were we the only ones that had slavery? Are we the only ones that had a problem with racism? Are we the only ones that had problems with gender imbalance or class imbalance? Or are we the only ones that did colonization? Or how different did we do those things than other people? And should it matter? Does it matter? You see what I'm saying? We're going to go into all these big questions, and I'm hoping to just really get you thinking more thoughtfully about all of these very important topics that are so divisive for us in modern American life. Okay? And so, again, feel free to talk freely, but just mind your manners. All right? And then the last thing to say, okay, so what about the work? I'm giving you an example of what a paper should look like and video notes. I have a paper that is for a class that's later on in the semester as an example, just an excerpt, so a small piece. And then I have video notes that come from my 106 class, but they're examples of how the notes should look. So yes, you have to have notes on all the videos. And for the paper, I give examples of how the citations should work. You're only going to work with whatever texts are that we're covering for the papers. A lot of times you'll just have to do a paper on the Zen book, and I just expect you to put brackets for Zen and the page number. You're not having to use, are not required to use MLA. But keep in mind, if you're going to be a history major, history majors usually use Chicago style. Now, we're not doing this right now. A little later, I'm going to make a video just for history majors of things that I want to help you have a heads up on if you want to pursue, going into history outside of the community college. Okay, and so keep in mind also, I don't use the calendar, as I mentioned, so you need to look at the weekly work objectives. Work will be due on Thursdays by midnight or Sundays by midnight, and sometimes it'll be just on Sundays. It's very straightforward. There's never, the routine, once you get it down, you're going to see it's very easy to follow. So, and I'm going to make a weekly announcement on Sundays. Every once in a while, I'll post other things on announcements, just like you might find of interest. They usually won't be this long. This is my introduction video to this class, and you are required to watch this because this is a way to help you get going into the class. But again, I'm normally not going to go 19 minutes into an introduction, to each week's introduction. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. You can write to me on Canvas at any time, because Canvas, is a great place. It goes directly into my message box, and then whenever I have a chance, I can write you back. If you text me, you can do it, but never earlier than 11 a.m. and no later than 5 p.m. Okay, I work another job, so bear with me. I will always try to get back to you as soon as possible. I'm pretty good about that, but I'm a mere human, a mere mortal And even though I have a strong work ethic, I am sometimes just pressed for time. But I'm going to do my best to get a hold of you. And most students will tell you that's had me that I do a pretty good job of that. All right, I'll stop talking. Welcome everyone to my class, and I hope we're going to have a good time with this and learn a lot of U.S. history.